The rain fell heavy on the jungle leaves, creating a constant drumming sound that masked footsteps and whispers. Commander Zixa Theta moved his elongated purple fingers across the holographic display floating above his command post. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he studied the terrain map. The Vorthak invasion force had chosen this jungle world perfectly. The thick canopy blocked orbital surveillance, the humid air disrupted most scanning technology, and the terrain favored their reptilian soldiers who could climb trees and see heat signatures in the darkness. "Sector 7 clear," reported Sub-Commander Krex through the neural link. "The humans abandoned this outpost 3 days ago. We found only empty supply crates and discarded equipment." Zix Theta's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. The human colonial forces had retreated to their main settlement 60 kilometers north, leaving the jungle to the Vorthak. His warriors had already established 17 forward positions throughout the dense forest. In 2 more days, they would launch their final assault on the human colony. The jungle that humans feared would be their highway to victory. "Continue patrol patterns," Zixa Theta commanded. "The humans lack proper jungle training. They stumble through the undergrowth like wounded prey animals. Our thermal vision gives us every advantage in this environment." The Vorthak had studied human military doctrine extensively. Humans relied on technology, heavy armor, and orbital support. Take away their machines and satellites, force them into close terrain, and they became vulnerable. The jungle neutralized every human advantage while amplifying Vorthak strengths. Private First Class Maria Chen lay motionless in the mud, her body covered in a special thermal dampening suit that had cost her 3 months of hazard pay. She had been in position for 18 hours, watching the alien patrol routes through her scope. The rain helped mask her heat signature, but she knew the real trick was patience. Perfect, absolute stillness. She had no unit markings, no identification tags, no call sign in any military database. Officially, she didn't exist. Unofficially, she was the colony's last hope. The Vorthak patrol moved through her sector again, 4 soldiers in their distinctive scaled armor. They moved confidently, their weapons lowered. Why would they worry? Their thermal vision could spot a human from 200 meters away. Their natural climbing abilities let them move through the trees like spiders. Their hard scales deflected small arms fire. Maria slowly adjusted her rifle, a custom job she had built herself. The barrel was wrapped in heat-dissipating mesh. The scope used purely mechanical adjustments, no electronics that could be detected. The ammunition was subsonic, designed to be silent in the heavy jungle air. She had studied the Vorthak for weeks. Their thermal vision was excellent, but it had a weakness. They couldn't see through certain natural materials when those materials matched the ambient temperature exactly. Mud, for instance, when mixed with local plant sap, became almost invisible to their sensors. It had taken her days to figure out the right combination. The patrol leader stopped, his head tilting. Something had caught his attention. Maria remained frozen, not even breathing. A beetle crawled across her hand. A drop of water fell from a leaf onto her scope. She didn't move. After 30 seconds, the patrol moved on. Maria waited another full hour before slowly, carefully adjusting her position. She had identified 43 Vorthak positions over the past week. Tonight, that would change. Specialist Terrence Webb crouched behind a fallen log 2 kilometers from Maria's position, though neither knew of the other's presence. He also wore no unit insignia, carried no identification. His rifle was different from Maria's, but built on the same principles: silent, invisible, deadly. The colony's military commander had been clear. "I can't order anyone to do this. It's suicide. But if volunteers want to try something stupid on their own time, well, I can't stop civilians from hunting in their own forests." 47 men and women had volunteered. No names were recorded. No orders were given. They simply melted into the jungle with whatever supplies they could acquire. Most military personnel thought they were deserters. That was fine. Better that than the truth, getting to Vorthak intelligence. Webb watched a Vorthak supply convoy moving along what they thought was a hidden trail. The aliens had made one crucial mistake. They assumed human military doctrine was universal among humans. They had studied armies, analyzed tactics, dissected command structures. They hadn't studied human history. They didn't know about the ghosts of Earth's jungles, Vietnam, Burma, the Amazon conflicts. They didn't understand that some humans didn't need technology to become predators. The first shot came at 0200 local time. Sub-Commander Krex was reviewing patrol reports when his head simply disappeared. No sound, no muzzle flash, no warning. His body stood for a moment before toppling forward onto the communication console. 3 seconds later, 800 meters away, Sergeant Vektar was climbing to his observation post when a hole appeared in his chest. He looked down in confusion at the purple blood spreading across his armor before falling 40 feet to the jungle floor. Within 5 minutes, 11 Vorthak soldiers were dead. No alerts were raised because the humans had studied their communication patterns. They knew exactly how long they had before scheduled check-ins. They knew which targets to hit first to create confusion in the chain of command. Commander Zixatheta received the first panicked reports at 0217. Command Post 7 is not responding. Command Post 12 reports finding bodies. No enemy contact. No sensor readings. Request immediate. The transmission cut off. Full alert, Zixatheta ordered. All units to defensive positions. Activate proximity sensors and motion trackers. The technology that should have protected them became their weakness. Maria smiled grimly as she watched through her scope. The Vorthak were looking for heat signatures, electronic signals, movement patterns. They weren't looking for humans who had learned to become part of the jungle itself. She took her next shot, then immediately began her evacuation pattern. 2 minutes to break down her position. 3 minutes to move to the next prepared site. She had 17 more positions prepared over a 10-kilometer area. The mud and plant sap that covered her body made her invisible to their sensors. The rain washed away her tracks. The jungle that was supposed to be the Vorthak's advantage had become her ally. Across the valley, James Patterson, not his real name, just one he had chosen for this mission, watched a Vorthak squad trying to triangulate where shots had come from. They were using standard military search patterns, checking likely sniper positions based on angle and distance. They would never find anything because human snipers weren't following military doctrine. They were following older rules, lessons written in blood in Earth's jungles generations ago. One shot, move, wait. One shot, move, wait. The Vorthak had expected human soldiers. They had gotten human hunters instead. By dawn, 31 Vorthak soldiers were dead. No human bodies had been found. No positions had been discovered. The jungle had swallowed the killers completely. Commander Zixatheta stood in his command post, his 4 eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. The holographic display showed the casualty reports, each death marked by a pulsing red dot. His second-in-command lay dead at his feet, killed by a shot that had somehow penetrated their fortified command center through a ventilation shaft thought too small to be a threat. "Sir," his new second-in-command reported nervously, "the troops are requesting permission to withdraw to tighter defensive positions." Zixatheta's mandibles ground together. Withdraw? They were the Vorthak Empire's finest jungle warfare specialists. They had conquered 17 worlds. They did not withdraw from primitives with projectile weapons. "Negative," he said. "Deploy hunter-killer teams. Use the bioscanners. Find these humans." But the bioscanners found nothing. The motion trackers detected only wildlife. The thermal sensors showed empty jungle. It was as if the humans had become ghosts. Dr. Sarah Kim, another chosen name, lay in her hide, chewing on a protein bar that tasted like cardboard and regret. She had been a xenobiologist before the invasion. Now she was something else. Her rifle lay beside her, its barrel still cool despite the 7 shots she had taken during the night. She watched a Vorthak hunter-killer team moving through her sector. They were good, she admitted. Their movements were coordinated, their spacing perfect. Their equipment was far superior to anything the humans had. It didn't matter. The team leader stepped on what looked like solid ground. The deadfall trap had taken her 3 days to prepare. Sharpened stakes, covered with local neurotoxins, punched through the gaps in his armor. His screams echoed through the jungle before cutting off abruptly. His squad mates spun, weapons raised, searching for an enemy. Sarah didn't give them one. She was already gone, moving to her next position. Let them find the trap. Let them waste time analyzing it. Let fear work on them while she repositioned. This wasn't warfare as the Vorthak understood it. There were no battle lines, no objectives to capture, no territory to hold. There was only the jungle and the ghosts that haunted it. Captain Marcus Thompson watched the Vorthak base through binoculars that had been old when his grandfather was young. No electronics meant no emissions to trace. Simple tools for a simple job. He counted sentries, noted patrol changes, memorized routines. The Vorthak were adapting, trying new patterns, new technologies. They had started cutting down trees to create clear fields of fire. They had deployed automated turrets with overlapping coverage. They had brought in specialist units trained in counter-sniper operations. None of it would save them. They were fighting the wrong war. Thompson made a small mark in his notebook, then began the slow crawl back to his hide. Tomorrow night, the automated turrets would malfunction. A small EMP device, shielded until the moment of activation, would see to that. The Vorthak would have exactly 4 minutes of vulnerability while they rebooted their systems. 4 minutes was a lifetime for a good marksman. The second night was worse than the first. 53 Vorthak died, some to rifles, some to traps, some to improvised explosives made from mining equipment. The jungle itself seemed to have turned against the invaders. Subcommander Hecklon led his squad through the pre-dawn darkness, every nerve on edge. His thermal vision swept back and forth, searching for any heat signature that didn't belong. His audio sensors strained for any sound beyond the constant rain and dripping water. "Contact front," his point soldier reported. "Dead Vorthak. Appears to be Lieutenant Ventar." Hecklon moved forward carefully. Ventar hung upside down from a tree, suspended by vines. A single hole in his forehead showed how he died. But why display the body? The answer came when Private Kex stepped forward to cut down the lieutenant. The ground beneath him erupted. Not an explosion, but something worse. A pit filled with water and something else. Kex's screams told them everything they needed to know about what else was in that water. By the time they pulled him out, the local predators had already done their work. "Pull back," Hecklon ordered, his voice shaking. "All units pull back to primary defensive positions." But there were no safe positions. The humans had had weeks to prepare. Every clearing was pre-sighted. Every trail was trapped. Every tree could hide death. Maria Chen watched the Vorthak retreat through her scope. She didn't fire. Let them run. Let them cluster together in their bases. Let them abandon the jungle paths they had so confidently controlled just days before. Fear was a weapon too, and sometimes it killed more effectively than bullets. She keyed her radio, sending a brief burst of static. 3 clicks, pause, 2 clicks. Message received. Phase 1 complete. The other ghosts would be getting similar signals. Time to disappear for a while, let the Vorthak think they had breathing room. The jungle fell quiet except for the rain. Somewhere in the distance, a Vorthak soldier whimpered in his sleep, dreaming of invisible death. The invasion force that had come to conquer found themselves prisoners in their own bases, afraid to venture into the green hell that surrounded them. And in that hell, the ghosts waited. Patient, invisible, inevitable. Commander Zixtheta stared at the holographic map with all 4 eyes, watching the red zones expand. Places where his soldiers wouldn't go, places where death waited. In just 6 days, the humans had turned victory into nightmare. His invasion force of 3,000 had lost 217 soldiers to an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't catch, couldn't understand. The morning briefing was a catalog of horror. Patrol 37 had found their scout hanging from vines, dead for hours, though he'd reported in just minutes before. The body had been booby-trapped. 2 more soldiers died trying to retrieve it. Supply Convoy 9 had simply vanished. 40 soldiers, 12 vehicles, tons of equipment. Gone. The jungle had swallowed them whole, leaving only empty vehicles covered in strange symbols, drawn in mud. "We need orbital bombardment," Sub-Commander Vresh suggested, his scales pale with exhaustion. "Burn the jungle, deny them cover." "And destroy the very resources we came to harvest?" Zix Theta's mandibles clicked sharply. "The Empire wants this world's exotic flora intact. Besides, our ships can't target what they can't see. The canopy is too thick, the weather too severe." "Then what do we do?" Vresh asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "The troops won't leave the bases. They're terrified. These humans, they're not fighting like soldiers." That was the problem. The Vorthak had beaten human soldiers before. They understood military tactics, could counter strategies, could predict battlefield behavior. But these weren't soldiers. These were something older, more primal. These were persistence hunters. The same instinct that had once chased prey to exhaustion across Earth's ancient plains. Liu Wei, a name borrowed from a long-dead uncle, adjusted his scope minutely, watching the Vorthak commander through a window he probably thought was secure. Wei had been lying in the same position for 31 hours, buried under leaves and mud, breathing through a hollow reed. His muscles screamed, his body ached, but his hands remained steady. The shot would be difficult. 900 meters through heavy rain, crosswind gusting to 12 knots. The window was reinforced transparasteel, rated against most kinetic weapons. But Wei's ammunition wasn't standard. Each bullet was hand-loaded, the charge precisely measured, the projectile machined to thousandths of an inch. He knew exactly how much energy he needed to penetrate that window at this range, but he didn't take the shot. Not yet. Dead commanders could be replaced. Terrified commanders made mistakes. Instead, he shifted his aim slightly. The holographic projector next to Zix Theta exploded in a shower of sparks. The commander threw himself to the ground, his guards rushing to cover the windows. Wei was already moving, breaking down his rifle with practiced efficiency. By the time the Vorthak quick reaction force reached his position, they would find only a shallow depression in the earth and the lingering smell of human. Across the sector, Angela Foster crawled through a maintenance tunnel she had discovered weeks ago. The Vorthak had built their main supply base over an old mining complex, assuming the tunnels were sealed. They were, mostly. But miners knew how to make their own doors. She placed the charges carefully. Not explosives. The Vorthak would detect those. Instead, she left behind small canisters of pheromone extract. She had spent days milking the glands of local predators, creatures the Vorthak had dismissed as minor threats. The jungle cats were only dangerous in mating season, after all. Of course, the Vorthak didn't know that concentrated mating pheromones could trigger a frenzy from kilometers away. She set the timer for dawn, then began the long crawl back. Tomorrow would be interesting. Private Corm tried to stay alert on sentry duty, but his 4 eyes kept drifting. The humans never attacked the same way twice. Snipers one day, traps the next, then nothing for days until you relaxed. Then they struck again. His scales itched under his armor. When was the last time he had truly rested? A sound made him spin, weapon raised. Just a bird. Always birds. The humans had learned to mimic their calls perfectly. Every sound could be death. Every shadow could hide a killer. Some soldiers had started shooting at nothing, wasting ammunition on ghosts. He didn't see the thin wire until his foot touched it. The grenade wasn't meant to kill, just to maim. Corm's screams brought his squad running. They found him alive but missing his left leg, crying out in the rain. The medic worked frantically to stop the bleeding while others set up a defensive perimeter. None of them noticed the small camera hidden in a tree trunk, recording everything. The footage would be edited later, compiled with dozens of similar scenes. The Vorthak had made one critical error. They had brought journalists to document their glorious conquest. Those same communication channels could carry different messages. Messages of fear, messages of failure. Dr. Michael Santos studied his notebook in the dim light of his hide. The Vorthak followed patterns, even in their panic. When stressed, they reverted to trained responses, predictable responses. He had a PhD in xenopsychology, specializing in reptilian cognition. The university probably thought he was dead. Instead, he was conducting the most detailed field study of Vorthak behavior ever attempted. They clustered when frightened, seeking safety in numbers. Their visual processing prioritized movement over stillness. Their decision-making degraded rapidly under sustained stress. Most importantly, their social hierarchy was rigid. Kill the right links in the chain of command, and entire units became paralyzed. He marked another observation, then prepared his rifle. Tonight's targets were carefully chosen. Not commanders, but the trusted sergeants who actually ran things. The Vorthak military was like a skeleton. Remove the right bones, and the whole structure collapsed. The pheromone attack came at dawn, just as Angela had planned. Hundreds of jungle cats, driven to frenzy by the concentrated scent, descended on Supply Base 7. The Vorthak weapons cut down dozens, but more kept coming. In the chaos, no one noticed the snipers picking off ammunition handlers. No one saw the thermite charges attached to fuel tanks. By the time the attack ended, the base was in ruins. 60 Vorthak were dead, and their main supply line was severed. Commander Zixatheta received the report in silence. His staff waited nervously for orders, for rage, for something. But he just stared at the tactical display, watching red zones spread like infection across his operational area. 300 dead now, 10% of his force eliminated by an enemy that might number less than 50. "Sir," Communications Officer Dex interrupted, "we're intercepting human transmissions. They're broadcasting on our emergency frequencies. Put it through," Zixatheta ordered. The voice was calm, almost conversational, gender indeterminate, accent impossible to place. "Vorthak Expeditionary Force, this is Ghost 1. You have two options. Leave this world immediately or become fertilizer for our jungle. You have 48 hours to decide. End transmission." "Triangulate that signal," Zixatheta commanded. "Already did, sir. It came from everywhere. They're bouncing it off our own communication satellites." The commander's mandibles ground together. Even their technology was being turned against them. But warriors of the Empire did not retreat from primitives. They would adapt. They would overcome. They had to. Master Sergeant Rebecca Hayes watched the Vorthak response through her scope. They were pulling back to 3 main bases, abandoning their dispersed positions, concentrating their forces. It was the smart move, militarily speaking. It was also exactly what the ghosts wanted. Concentrated forces meant concentrated targets. Limited patrol areas meant predictable patterns. Most importantly, it meant the Vorthak were thinking defensively. In warfare, the side that stopped attacking had already lost. She squeezed off a shot, watched the communications antenna explode, then vanished into the green. Let them huddle in their bases. Let them count the hours until the deadline. The real attack hadn't even started yet. Night fell like a burial shroud over the jungle. In their fortified positions, Vorthak soldiers checked weapons, tested sensors, and jumped at shadows. They had faced enemies across the galaxy, conquered worlds with advanced technology and proud military traditions. But they had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that turned their own assumptions against them. In the darkness beyond their lights, the ghosts prepared. Everyone had been busy during the 2-day lull. New positions established, new traps set, new horrors prepared. The Vorthak thought they were fighting a war of attrition. They didn't understand they were being hunted. Zhang Lin checked his equipment one final time. The electromagnetic pulse device was crude but effective. The shaped charges were placed precisely. The escape routes were memorized. He had been a demolitions expert before the invasion, trained to bring down buildings safely. Tonight, he would use those skills differently. The main Vorthak command base sat on a hill, surrounded by cleared ground, motion sensors, and automated defenses. Impregnable to conventional assault. But Zhang wasn't mounting a conventional assault. He was an engineer, and engineers solved problems. The old mine shaft ran directly under the hill. The Vorthak scanners had detected it, of course, but showed it blocked by tons of fallen rock. They didn't know about the narrow maintenance crawlway that bypassed the blockage. They didn't know a determined human could squeeze through spaces that would trap a larger Vorthak. They didn't know the ghosts had been preparing this moment for weeks. At exactly midnight, 3 things happened simultaneously. The EMP pulse disabled the automated defenses for precisely 90 seconds. Sniper fire from 6 positions suppressed the guards. And 40 kilograms of mining explosives detonated directly beneath the command center's foundation. The building didn't collapse. Zhang was too skilled for that. Instead, it tilted 6 degrees, just enough to shatter windows, buckle doors, and trap half the command staff in twisted metal, just enough to create chaos, just enough for the snipers to work. By the time the Vorthak response forces arrived, the ghosts were gone. Behind them, they left 17 dead officers, a crippled command structure, and a message painted in bioluminescent bacteria on the tilted wall. 36 hours remaining. Sub-Commander Vresh found himself in command of a broken force. Zixatheta lived but was trapped in the twisted command center, his lower body crushed by fallen beams. The senior staff was decimated. Communications were intermittent, and somewhere in the darkness, human voices howled like the predators they had become. "Orders, sir?" his aide asked, voice trembling. Vresh looked at the tactical display, at the spreading red zones, at the casualty lists that grew longer each hour. They had come to this world as conquerors. Now they were the conquered, beaten not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by humans who had remembered what they truly were: persistence predators, pack hunters, ghosts in the green. "Signal the fleet," he said quietly. "Request immediate evacuation." But the ghosts weren't finished. As Vorthak forces tried to consolidate for evacuation, the attacks intensified. Supply convoys vanished. Landing zones were hit with improvised mortars. Communications went dead at critical moments. The ordered withdrawal became a rout. Emma Rodriguez watched through binoculars as Vorthak soldiers ran for their shuttles, discipline forgotten in their desperation to escape. She could have taken a dozen shots, killed dozens more. But that wasn't necessary now. They were broken. The jungle had beaten them. She keyed her radio. "Ghost 7 to all ghosts. Mission accomplished. They're leaving." One by one, confirmations came in. Ghosts who had spent weeks becoming one with the jungle, who had turned fear into a weapon more powerful than any rifle. Ordinary people who had done extraordinary things because the alternative was slavery or death. The last Vorthak shuttle lifted off 36 hours after the ultimatum, carrying less than 2,000 survivors from a force of 3,000. They left behind equipment worth billions, abandoned bases, and hundreds of their dead. But more than that, they left behind their reputation of invincibility. Word would spread through the galaxy. The Vorthak, masters of jungle warfare, had been beaten, not by an army, but by ghosts, by humans who refused to fight by the rules, who turned terrain into an ally, who remembered that before they were civilized, they were the most terrifying persistence predators their world had ever produced. Maria Chen emerged from the jungle for the first time in 3 weeks. Her thermal suit was in tatters, her body covered in mud and insect bites. She had lost 15 kilograms. Her rifle, carefully maintained through it all, gleamed with oil. She had no official kill count because officially she had never been here. None of them had. The colonial governor met them at the tree line, tears in his eyes. "How many?" he asked. "How many of you survived?" 43 left. 4 confirmed dead, Maria reported. "We held them. They won't be back." 47 held off 3,000. The governor shook his head in disbelief. "No, sir," Maria corrected. "The jungle held them. We just reminded them why humans used to be the scariest thing in it." As the ghosts emerged from the trees, colonial security forces stared in awe. These weren't super soldiers. They were mechanics and teachers, doctors and engineers. Ordinary people who had become extraordinary because they had to. Because when everything else failed, humans could still become the nightmare that evolution had shaped them to be. The jungle began to reclaim the abandoned Vorthak bases within days. Vines covered equipment, rain washed away blood, and the green swallowed evidence of the brief invasion. But in the military academies of a dozen species, new lessons would be taught. Lessons about what happened when you cornered humans, when you took away their technology and forced them to remember what they were. Lessons about the ghosts in the green. The snipers without call signs, the humans who refused to lose. Admiral Kexvara of the Vorthak Imperial Fleet stood before the War Council, his 4 eyes unable to meet the gaze of his superiors. The holographic recordings played in damning silence, soldiers running in panic, officers cowering in bunkers. The pride of the Jungle Warfare Division reduced to frightened prey. 3,000 of our finest, Supreme Commander Velthok said slowly, each word dropping like acid. Defeated by fewer than 50 humans. Explain this disgrace. They didn't fight conventionally, Kexvara began, but Velthok's tail slammed against the floor, silencing him. Show me their weapons. Show me their technology. Show me what gave them this advantage. The Admiral gestured to the evidence table. Captured rifles, crude by galactic standards. Projectile weapons with no targeting computers, no energy signatures, no advanced materials, simple tools that should have been useless against modern armor. They used the jungle itself, Kexvara explained. They became part of it. Our thermal sensors, motion trackers, every advantage we had, they found ways to circumvent them all. Primitives with slug throwers, another council member hissed, and they drove off the Empire's best. The galaxy watches, Admiral, our tributary worlds whisper. If humans can do this, they ask, why not us? That was the real fear. Not the military defeat, but what it represented. The Vorthak Empire ruled through fear of their military might. That fear was now cracked, perhaps broken. 6 months had passed since the evacuation. On the jungle world, now designated Haven 7 in human records, Colonel Sarah Mitchell walked through the new memorial. 47 names carved in black granite, though only 4 had died in the fighting. The others had succumbed to disease, infection, or simple exhaustion in the weeks after. Being a ghost had carried a price. "Ma'am," her aide interrupted, "priority message from Earth Command. The Vorthak are mobilizing again." Mitchell read the intelligence report carefully. A massive fleet, 10 times the size of the original invasion force. The Empire couldn't afford to let the defeat stand. They were coming back, and this time they would take no chances. Orbital bombardment would turn the jungle to ash before a single soldier landed. "How long?" she asked. 6 weeks, maybe 8. Mitchell nodded slowly. They had known this was coming. The ghosts had won a battle, not a war. But their victory had done something more important than defend one colony. It had reminded humanity what they were capable of. It had sparked something across human space. On Earth, In the military academies that had once taught conventional warfare, new courses were being developed. Ancient texts were being studied. Vietnam, Afghanistan, the Boer Wars. Every conflict where a smaller force had used terrain and determination to defeat a superior enemy. On Mars, volunteer training camps sprouted in the Red Desert, citizens learning to shoot, to hide, to survive, not to be soldiers, but to be something more primal. The videos from Haven 7 were studied endlessly. How did they make the thermal suits? How did they stay hidden for so long? How did they break an empire's will? On the frozen world of Kepler 442b, colonists practiced in the ice caves. Different terrain, same principles. Become the environment. Turn assumptions into weaknesses. Make the enemy afraid of their own shadows. But the real change was happening in boardrooms and parliament halls. Defense budgets that had focused on fleet battles and energy weapons suddenly included line items for asymmetric warfare research and indigenous terrain exploitation. The Ghost program, never officially acknowledged, received unlimited funding. Dr. Chen Lu, formerly Private First Class Maria Chen, stood before a room of scientists and military officials. The thermal dampening suit she wore was third generation now, incorporating lessons learned in blood. But the real advancement wasn't in the technology. The Vorthak made a fundamental error, she explained, gesturing to psychological profiles on the screen. They assumed human military doctrine was human nature. They studied our armies, our tactics, our command structures. They didn't study our history. They didn't understand that before we were civilized, we were the apex persistence predators of Earth. She clicked to the next slide, showing brain scans. Every human carries this legacy, the ability to track prey for days, the patience to wait in ambush for hours, the pack coordination that doesn't require verbal communication. We buried these instincts under civilization, but they never left. The Ghost program simply reminded us how to access them. Can it be taught? General Morrison asked. Can we create more ghosts? That's the wrong question, Chen replied. We don't create ghosts. We remind humans what they are. Show them the right triggers, put them in the right environment, and the predator emerges. The Vorthak taught us a valuable lesson. They showed us that our greatest weapon isn't technology. It's us. On Haven 7th, the colonists prepared for the coming storm. But they weren't alone now. Ships arrived daily, not military vessels but civilian transports. Volunteers from across human space coming to defend a world most had never seen. They brought hunting rifles and homemade gear, determination and desperation. Former Ghost Thomas Park, once Dr. Michael Santos, trained the newcomers. Not in military tactics, but in something older. How to read wind patterns, how to move without disturbing the forest floor, how to think like prey in order to become a predator. The Vorthak expect soldiers, he told each group, so don't be soldiers. Be hunters, be ghosts, be human. The orbital defense platforms were laughable by galactic standards. A few obsolete missile systems and some repurposed mining lasers. The Vorthak fleet would brush them aside in minutes. But that wasn't their purpose. Their purpose was to force the Vorthak to approach predictably, to channel them into killing fields that existed not in space, but in the minds of 10,000 hidden humans. When the Vorthak fleet arrived, it was even larger than intelligence had predicted. 400 ships, 50,000 ground troops, enough firepower to crack continents. Admiral Keksavara himself led the armada, determined to erase his shame. Commence bombardment, he ordered. Burn every forest, every jungle, leave nothing but ash. The plasma beams lanced down from orbit, turning vast swaths of green to black. Firestorms raged across continents. From space, it looked like the planet was dying. The Vorthak cheered. No ghost could survive this cleansing fire. But humans had known this was coming. For weeks they had been digging. Not just foxholes or bunkers, but vast underground networks, mining equipment repurposed for war, Cave systems expanded and connected. The same persistence that had let them hunt for days now let them dig for weeks. When the bombardment ended and Vorthak troops landed, they found a dead world. No vegetation to hide enemies, no terrain to exploit. Just ash and stone and silence. Their thermal sensors showed nothing. Motion trackers detected only wind-blown debris. They had won. The first mine detonated under a personnel carrier, improvised from industrial explosives. The second took out a command vehicle. Then the ghosts emerged from the ash itself, their suits now designed for this dead landscape. They rose from hidden tunnels like the planet's vengeance, struck, and vanished again. Lieutenant Hextel led his squad through the ruins of what had been a forest. His sensors showed nothing, but he knew they were out there. The humans, the ghosts, waiting, always waiting. A private to his left simply fell over, a hole in his helmet. No shot heard, no muzzle flash seen. Another soldier spun and fired at shadows. Then another fell, and another. In 30 seconds, half his squad was dead, and he had seen nothing. "Fall back!" he screamed. But where was safe? The entire planet had become a killing field. Every pile of ash could hide a tunnel entrance. Every ruined tree stump could conceal a sniper. The bombardment that should have made them safe had simply created a different jungle, one made of char and shadow. Admiral Keksavara watched the casualty reports in growing horror. 1,000 dead on the first day, 3,000 by the end of the week. His overwhelming force was being bled dry by an enemy that shouldn't exist. The bombardment should have killed them all. How were they surviving? How were they fighting? The answer came from an unexpected source, a captured human, wounded and dying. Not a soldier, but a teacher, her homemade rifle still clutched in burned hands. "Why?" Keksavara asked her directly, breaking protocol to interrogate a prisoner himself. "How do you survive? How do you fight us?" She laughed, blood on her lips. "You still don't understand. You can't kill what we are. Burn the jungle. We become ash. Freeze us. We become ice. Put us in space. We become void. We're human. We adapt. We persist. We hunt." She died before revealing anything useful. But her words haunted Keksavara. He had fought dozens of species, conquered worlds with far greater technology than Earth. But none had been like this. None had turned their entire population into weapons. The war on Haven 7 dragged on for months. The Vorthak poured in reinforcements, sent their best units, deployed weapons that turned sand to glass. It didn't matter. The ghosts multiplied. Every dead human inspired 10 more to take up arms. Children who should have been in school learned to shoot from kilometers away. Elderly colonists who could barely walk spent days crafting ammunition. And the tactics evolved. Where the first ghosts had been subtle, these were savage. They left displays that would have horrified the original 47. Vorthak patrols found squadmates skinned and arranged in ritualistic patterns. Officers woke to find their guards dead and messages written in their blood. The psychological warfare reached levels that made commanders beg for reassignment. But the real evolution was happening across human space. The Battle of Haven 7, as historians would later call it, became a rallying cry. Worlds that had considered surrender began building tunnel networks. Civilian militia groups formed on every colony. The ghost methodology spread like wildfire, adapted for every environment. On the water world of Centauri B, humans learned to hold their breath for impossible lengths, attacking from beneath waves. On the ice moon of Wolf 1061C, they became invisible in blizzards. On the volcanic world of Glisa 667cc, they emerged from lava tubes like demons of sulfur and flame. The Vorthak Empire found itself fighting not one war, but 1,000. Every human world became a potential Haven 7. Every human became a potential ghost. The cost in ships, soldiers, and resources spiraled beyond sustainability. Supreme Commander Velthok called the emergency session himself. The War Council gathered, but the confidence of earlier meetings was gone. They faced a terrible truth. They could defeat human fleets, capture human cities, even destroy human worlds, but they couldn't defeat humans themselves. "We have lost 30,000 soldiers trying to retake one agricultural world," Velthok stated. "The projections for conquering all human space are unsustainable. 1 million soldiers, perhaps 2 million. And even then, the resistance would never end." "They're primitives," Council member Zargraf protested. "Their weapons are simple, their technology inferior." "And yet they win," Velthok replied. "Because they fight a different war. We fight for territory, for resources, for dominance. They fight for survival. And a human fighting for survival becomes something our doctrine cannot counter." The debate raged for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. The Vorthak Empire, which had never signed a peace treaty in its 1,000-year history, sent diplomats to Earth. The negotiations were brief. Humanity wanted only to be left alone. No reparations, no territory, no submission, just recognition of their sovereignty. But the real victory wasn't in the treaty. It was in the message sent to the galaxy. The Vorthak, undefeated in conventional warfare, had met their match in humans who refused to fight conventionally. Word spread to species under Vorthak rule, to worlds considering resistance. If humans could do it. Back on Haven 7th, in a small bar in the colonial capital, Maria Chen sat with the other surviving ghosts. 43 had lived through the first campaign, but thousands had joined them for the second. The memorial wall now held over 3,000 names. The cost of freedom written in lives. "They say we changed warfare," Thomas Park mused, staring into his drink. "Showed the galaxy a new way to fight." "We didn't show them anything new," Chen replied. "We just reminded everyone of something old. Before we were soldiers, before we were civilized, we were hunters. The Vorthak forgot that. They won't forget again." Outside, the jungle was already reclaiming the battlefield. Green shoots pushed through ash. Vines covered abandoned Vorthak equipment. Life persisted as humans persisted. The ghosts had returned to their lives, teachers and doctors, engineers and farmers, but they kept their rifles clean and their skills sharp, just in case. Because the galaxy now knew what humans were capable of. The secret was out. Push humans hard enough, corner them, threaten their survival, and they became something that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They became ghosts. They became predators. They became human. The Vorthak Empire never again threatened human space. Other species, emboldened by humanity's example, began their own resistance movements. The galaxy's balance of power shifted, not through fleets or technology, but through the simple reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the refusal to fight by the enemy's rules. And in military academies across the galaxy, new courses were taught. Not about the noble art of warfare, but about the terrifying efficiency of human persistence. About ghosts who turned jungles into graveyards. About a species that could become invisible, implacable, inevitable. About the day the Vorthak learned why humans had once been the only sapient species on their world. Everything else had been prey. Years later, when Admiral Keksavara wrote his memoirs, he included a warning that became famous across known space. Do not invade human worlds. Do not threaten human colonies. Do not assume they will fight as you expect, for when pressed, humans do not become better soldiers. They become something far worse. They become themselves. The ghosts of Haven 7 had taught the galaxy a lesson it would never forget. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in the weapons you build or the armies you field. Sometimes it's in remembering what you are when everything else is stripped away. And humans, the galaxy learned, stripped of civilization and pressed to the brink, were the most terrifying persistence predators evolution had ever produced. The war was over. The hunt would never end.